Thanks. All right, well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming out tonight. And thanks to the Friends of the Kankakee Public Library for inviting me to speak tonight. Like Nate said, I teach at Olivet. I teach astronomy, I teach physics, I teach in the honors program at Olivet. And my training is in the history of science. So my PhD is in the history and philosophy of science. And I've taught a few history of science courses at Olivet as well. So what I'll do tonight is just talk a little bit about my writing, and then kind of the process of how this book, First Fleet, came to be. A little bit about the contents of the book, what's the book about, what's in it, hopefully without giving too much away. And then, depending on how much time we have, I'm happy to just we could talk about science fiction in general. I'm happy to answer questions about the writing process. Really anything that we want to talk about as a group. So let me just I'll brag on myself just a little bit briefly. So even if the rest of the talk bombs, the library can at least say that we had an internationally published, award-winning author. So it's really easy to be internationally published. All you have to do is sell one story in Canada, and you're an international author. I like to tell people I write science fiction and fantasy. I write short stories primarily. And I tell people I've been published in 4 languages, right? American, here in the United States, Canadian in Canada, Australian. I've published one of my stories in a magazine in Australia. And then very, very randomly, one of my stories that was published here was actually translated into Polish and published in a Polish science fiction magazine, which I have over here. And my name actually appears on the cover next to a picture of, who's the guy that played the Hobbit? Martin Freeman, yeah. Yeah, I was really excited when it came in the mail. I'm like, that's my name, and then his face. And it's also easy to say you're an award-winning author because no one ever asks you what awards you've actually won, right? So one of my nonfiction, one of my research publications won an essay contest. One of my short stories recently was one of the winners of the Neoglyphic short story contest and is forthcoming in their anthology. But the most important award that I was the first place prize winner of the Benner Library student poetry competition when I was an undergrad at Olivet. And I'll never forget, I got a $50 gift card to Barnes & Noble. And as a college student, I was like, that's it. I'm going to be a writer. This is amazing, right? So luckily, I haven't published really hardly any poetry since then. So I publish short stories. I like writing short stories. I love science fiction and fantasy. I grew up reading science fiction and fantasy. My mom would always ask, why don't you write stories about real people, real things? And yeah, that's fine, but what I liked to read and what was fun to write was science fiction and fantasy. I had Heather set up some of the artists, some of the writers that I was really influenced by. So if you're interested, some of my favorite authors, some of their books that you can check out at the library are here set up in the back room or in that back table. So I like writing short stories, science fiction and fantasy. Because it's my day job, right, is I'm teaching. Right? I'm a full-time professor, and so I tell students if they want to be writers, I say the first thing you need to do is you need to get a job, right? Because you need to get a job that supports your writing habit. And ideally a job that's going to give you a lot of opportunities to write. So in my own work, I get to write book reviews, I get to write research, and so that kind of feeds into the writing that I actually do. But this is a book, so this is a novel. So how did this actually come to be, how do you go from short stories to novels? And I probably shouldn't say it, but this is the novel that I wrote by accident. So the germ of First Fleet, the reason that First Fleet kind of came to be is one of the things that I do when I write, in those rare periods of productivity, those rare seasons when I feel like I'm actually producing stuff, is I free write. I just try to get as many ideas out there on the page as I can. And then what I'll do is I'll go back later and I'll kind of look through those files and see. It's kind of like throwing a bunch of stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, right? What ideas were in there that were sort of interesting or compelling. And I had written sort of this couple-page treatment of this setting that was sort of creepy, kind of eerie. It was a hospital ship, right? A spaceship that was a hospital frigate, and it was this doctor who was working the graveyard shift, and he wasn't working over patients, he was working over bodies, right? So these bodies would come in, bodies of dead soldiers, and they'd be regenerated, right? They'd be regrown, like in test tubes, And then their memories that they had been scanned before their mission would be downloaded back into them. And so it was this way for sort of this interesting sci-fi concept. I thought it was kind of neat. But I didn't really know what to do with it. Often when I'm writing, I'll have ideas, but I'm not really sure how to actually make them do interesting things. The other thing that I do, though, is I'm always looking for markets, right? Who's actually out there looking to buy science fiction and fantasy? So lots of different magazines, but occasionally different anthologies. And so what happened was there was an anthology, a call for submissions of an anthology based on, it was going to be science fiction inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. If you don't know H.P. Lovecraft, he was this writer writing in the early 1900s, really kind of before science fiction had even coalesced as a genre. And he's writing some really, really creepy stuff. So H.P. Lovecraft's big thing is, there's probably intelligent life out there, but it is so alien, it's so different from us, it's so unfathomable that it would be horrifically terrifying. The human mind couldn't even really, comprehend what it was encountering. And so I thought, an anthology sort of based on some of the works of H.P. Lovecraft, or sort of as a tribute to H.P. Lovecraft. I was like, I could kind of do something like that with this story. That would fit. It's kind of a creepy story. And so I finished the story up. I polished it up. I thought I had a pretty good story, and I sent it off to this anthology. And it was rejected. Right? They didn't want it. Which, again, if you're writing and you're trying to sell your works, you're basically floating in a sea of rejection, right? That you get rejections all the time from lots of different magazines, and you get to brag to other authors about which magazines you've gotten your latest rejection from. So they didn't want it, so that was fine. But now I had a story. I had a sort of a standalone story, and I sent it off to another market. And actually, surprisingly quickly, it usually happens after several different attempts. It was picked up by this magazine, and the editor of the magazine said, hey, I really like this story, but. And whenever an editor says, hey, I really like this story, but, you just pay attention to the, hey, I really like this story, right? Because they're interested in your story, and editors, their job is to make your writing better, so it's going to appeal to their audiences. So he said, I really like this story, but the ending, it just doesn't have that twist, right? It doesn't have that thing that really just catches the readers. You've introduced this really interesting technology, but you need to do something with it. So could you rework the ending a little bit? I said, sure. So I got to work sort of retooling the ending, and it actually all came together. I remember it was after I'm also the planetarium director at Olivet. It was after a public show in the planetarium. Everyone was gone. The projectors were cooling down. I'm in the dark in the dome, and I have my laptop, and I'm typing away. And it just sort of clicked, and the story worked, and this twist happened, and it was really creepy. It was kind of dark, and I was like, ugh. But it worked, right? It was sort of, it made the story, the hardest thing to do as a writer is to take an idea and to really make that idea reach out and grab your reader's throat, right? To do something really unexpected. And so it worked, and that became the story. That's what now is Bones, right? So this is sort of the standalone sort of first part of the work that became First Fleet. And you can take these with you. Please, I don't want to take any of these home. These are what we were giving out at FantasyCon last year. So the idea was that we'd release the first part as the teaser, and then you could download the other pieces of the novel, which now we have all together as one novel. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of my story. So I had Bones, right? It was the story, and it was published in this magazine, and I thought that was the end of it. Well, I had a friend that actually went to Los Angeles, and she was going to be she was going to do some writing out in LA, and she met a producer who has a company called Retrofit Publishing, Retrofit Films, excuse me. And they do work for a lot of different big names. Some of the projects they've done are really neat. They do extended content for television shows and movies, so things that you see online, webisodes and things like that. And they were interested in starting up a line of science fiction horror. They wanted to do some online publishing of sci-fi horror. And that's not normally what I write. Most of my stories are not horror stories. But my friend in LA, they knew this producer, and she said, well, contact my friend Steve. He's published some different science fiction. He might have something that works for you. And the other thing that you learn as a writer is that if anyone ever asks to read what you've written, you send it to them immediately. You are interested. So they said, send me some of your stuff. So I sent them some of my published stories, including Bones. And they got back to me and they said, this is it. This is what we want. We're looking for this sort of thing. We want you to expand this into a novel. Can you expand? You kind of put this interesting puzzle, this interesting riddle before the readers. Now can you flesh that out into a novel? And I said, no. I'm writing my dissertation. I don't think I can be writing a novel right now. So we haggled a little bit, and that was kind of neat. I had a little bit of leverage because I didn't have a lot of time, but they were interested in me writing this novel. So I got a contract from them to write a novel. And so then I said, okay, I'm going to do an experiment. I'm going to see if this is possible. I was in the middle of graduate school. Did we have 3 kids at that point? I think we did. At least 3 kids. Maybe we had 4 kids. I said, what I'll do is I'll take one weekend and I'll just start writing. And I'll see if I can, take these characters and take them to a new place and sort of flesh that out. And about 2 or 3 days later, I was about 20,000 words into what became the first part of First Fleet. So they offered me this contract to write this novel, and so that's sort of how it worked. And the idea was it was going to be serialized. They published it in 3 parts. So I was basically writing 3 separate novellas that then they bundled together and became the book First Fleet. Now, it was the most fun about this for me, just the writing process as well, but actually working with the company and seeing them, actually create covers for your books, seeing the artwork for something that you've created is really, really exciting. And then they also did something that I had never even heard of before, and this is how I'm going to show you this really briefly. They created a book trailer, right? So like a movie preview for the book, and this is what I'm going to show you, and then I'll talk a little bit about the book itself. So let's see if this works.
In a deep space war, our fallen soldiers drift along listless trajectories. Our job, to retrieve and regenerate the bodies and reunite them with their minds. Battle after battle, remains are recovered and memories downloaded. This process kept our soldiers fighting fearlessly. Until something infiltrated the system. A threat resurrected to bring our destruction. First Fleet. A new series available only on Amazon.com.
So that was kind of neat to see, right? To see some of your concepts on the big, well, not really the big screen, but sort of the big screen. Now, the thing I will say about the Chris, who is one of the partners at Retrofit and was my editor, his background is in film production. So in the back of his mind, he really thinks in terms of cinematography and things like that. And it was a lot of fun working with him because at the end of the book, there's sort of this big, epic kind of space battle that takes place. And people have read it and said it feels like a movie. It feels like you're watching a movie. And that was sort of his influence, saying, think about this as a big cliffhanger battle scene. What would it look like? I had done a little bit of homework about retrofilm before I started working with them. And Chris, one of the 2 partners, actually worked for a little while for one of Tom Cruise's production companies. And so the first time I was talking to him on the phone, we were talking about the book, I said, okay, how many degrees of separation am I now from Tom Cruise? And he said, 1. He said, I worked for several years as one of Tom Cruise's personal assistants working out of his home. So I was like, wow. So if this is ever turned into a movie, starring Tom Cruise, I'll be very, very, very surprised. But a little bit not surprised because there's at least that connection. So the book itself is, so in the short story in Bones, I set this puzzle, right, this riddle, and basically that's what happened to the First Fleet. Something horrific, something awful has happened to it, but it happens off camera, so you don't really know what's going on. And that's fine in a short story, but then when you're writing the novel, you've got to answer those questions for your readers. And one of the things the editors wanted, they wanted sort of each layer to kind of be making the scope bigger and bigger and peeling out farther and farther. So I had to create what I did was I created 2 characters. And I basically sent them off to try to solve the answer of what happened to the fleet. 2 both female characters. My 2 primary protagonists are females. And when I started writing the book, my mother-in-law said, are you going to make a book with strong female characters? I was like, are there other types of females? I mean, I write from life, right? So you've got Becca, whose sister was aboard the fleet, and then you've got Cam, who is a mother and a wife, and she just is trying to stay out of this mess, and her past is sort of catching up with her. And they're trying to solve these puzzles and see what happened. And I was also able to play with some different scientific concepts, which was fun. So I looked at, what happens if you're a person, right, and you're killed, and then you're basically regrown from some cells of, like, maybe they can get your legs back or something, and they regrow you from these cells, and they re-download your memories that you had scanned from before you went into battle. Are you the same person, right? What does that mean? What does it mean to be human in that sense? I also got to play around with ideas of artificial intelligence. So there's this whole sub-theme through the novel, this subplot. And actually one of my favorite characters in the novel is the character that I created to be the biggest jerk in the novel. And the interaction that he has with some of these characters that are these artificial intelligences. And again, are they humans? What does it mean to be human in that context? And so as the scale kept getting bigger, another thing that we also played around with was social evolution, right? So there's this idea, as you start to realize what the conflict is that's happening in the background of the book, that there are these colonizers that have left Earth. They've been traveling at relativistic speeds, though, so for a generation has passed for them, and the rest of the galaxy, it's been like 300 or 400 years. So you have this this interesting conflict of cultures. So what does it mean to be human in that context? Incidentally, I've been teaching for the past 2 years in Olivet's honors program, where the theme of the entire honors program is, what does it mean to be human, right? So we've been able to play with these different ideas. So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of work to write, but I think I was able to do some pretty interesting things with it and have a lot of fun with it. I'm going to grab my notes really quick because I gave myself some notes because I knew I'd eventually run out of my train of thought. And what was I going to say in summation here? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I said everything on my list, basically. So, I'm happy to answer questions. I don't know if anyone's read the book. I don't want to give too much about the book away. I do have the book up here for sale if you're interested. Like I said, if you're not sure and you just want to read the teaser or just want to take one of these things with you, read Bones and take this pamphlet. If you get the whole novel, though, Bones is in there as well, so you get everything. And then over here I have just examples of some of the different magazines and anthologies where my stories have appeared in the past. So, thoughts or questions? Yes. Yes. No, that was fun. Yeah. So one of the things the library is doing is it's a library, right? It's a library initiative, right? They're having are we calling it Kankakee Street Talk? Is that the name we decided? I think that's a really cool name. Where they do interviews with different people from town. I think authors, business owners, maybe some local politicians, and I got to be interviewed by Nate in his car the other day, and that was fun. So yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But are you able to label where these ideas come from? I just, if I write, it's always just kind of yawn-inducing, kind of left brain. And I am so in awe of people who can do fantasy. Talk to me. How do you do this?
You asked a question like this the other day, and I was thinking more like developmentally, sort of, and one of the things that I remember distinctly, so when I was in it was maybe kindergarten and first grade, maybe before then, maybe before I was even reading, at the school that I went to, and I'd never heard of this anywhere else, I don't know if it's normal, they had something called a writing to read lab, where they would basically put these illiterate kids in front of a computer screen with a keyboard, and we were supposed to write stories. And in my parents' house, I have some of the stories that I painfully picked out, and you can kind of read them if they're sort of phonetic, and you can see. And I remember that distinctly, just writing stories as soon, or if even maybe before I was actually reading. And I don't know. So it's always reading and writing have always kind of gone hand in hand. And the weird thing is when I go back and I look at some of these stories, I was writing scary stories. I don't know. I never had to see a child psychologist or a psychiatrist or anything. But yeah, so that's, I don't know. Does that sort of answer possibly your question?
It is. I think it speaks to some of the roots of it. It blows me away to think about all the different places your mind must go.
One of the things I think, when I started writing short stories in earnest when I was in graduate school. And I felt at the time like it was really kind of a release valve, because I'm writing, I'm doing historical research. Everything has to be, everything I say, I have to be able to back up with a footnote or a citation of some sort. And then to be able to go and write something that could be internal, it had to be internally consistent, but I could make up whatever I wanted. I remember in graduate school, like, that sense of freedom writing. So I told Nate the other day, I think it was sort of so I didn't go insane during graduate school.
The other question I had is just more a technical question. Is there certain software you use or a procedure that you use to keep storylines straight and characters straight and things like that?
No.
I use Word. I've looked at different software for, I know there's some novel writing software out there like Scrivener. I have a friend who uses that a lot. But I use Word. The program or the website that I do use to keep all my submissions straight, because part of the process, and I didn't talk about this here, especially with short stories, is, okay, which markets are open? Which stories have I sent to those markets? Which stories have been rejected? And so it's kind of, in some sense, keeping a bunch of plates in the air, like, okay, Asimov doesn't want it, I'll send it to Magazine of Science Fiction and Fantasy. And knowing what stories are out and where they are. So I use a website called Duotrope, and it helps you organize that stuff, and then it also helps you search active markets. You can search by pay scale, you can search by genre, and I find that to be quite useful. It is, yes. It includes nonfiction and poetry as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I, every year, judge a novel writing competition that's elsewhere, but they send books to me. And nothing infuriates me more as a reader than loose ends that are left hanging and continuity issues and everything.
Right.
When you're writing something that's long, an extended storyline, how do you keep all that straight?
Right. By having a good editor.
I will tell you, if you buy, I have to make a confession. If you buy this edition, this is a limited run first edition, and there's a continuity error in it. And what happened was I caught it right away and fixed it, and it was fixed on the electronic version, and then the fix didn't make it into this. And when I ordered these to have on here tonight, I was checking some different things. There was actually a couple typos as well that I caught way back when this first came out into print. And I contacted my editor, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Oh yeah, we did it all electronically, but we would have had to take the book offline so they could reformat it and put it back on, and we didn't want to slow sales down. But if you order it now online, all those things should be fixed. But these," I said, "Well, that's all right. I'll just tell them it's a limited edition, the special first edition." So if you read this, I'll see if you can find the continuity error. So how do we keep that straight? A lot of proofreading. I go back through my stories over and over and over and over again. The more eyes that are on it. I don't do a lot of outlining. I think maybe if I started writing more novels, because again, this was basically sort of 3 novellas. If I started doing more novels, I might have to invest in something like Scrivener to keep that all straight. But at this point, just rereading and proofing and having an editor who can catch things for me.
It is always amazing to me that can be kept straight, because I don't think I can read it and understand when it's not happening. I don't think I could create it myself. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You talked about internal consistency and working on creating this world kind of inside your head. What is that like? Like just sitting inside your brain, like just having this
terrifying place.
This entire universe sitting inside your head that, unless you put it down on paper, nobody's gonna know.
Oh man.
I guess that's the drive to put it down on paper, right? So one of the things that I will say, I learned this fairly early on. I'm not someone who and this will be very interesting, me telling it to you, Caleb. I'm not someone who externalizes my ideas. If I have an idea for a story, I don't like to talk about it. I saw a TED Talk not too long ago. I know I've told Eric about this, where he was talking about how if you have an idea, something that you want to do, you shouldn't tell people. Because if you tell people, there's psychologically, you've already kind of gotten the good feelings from sharing your idea. So I tell people, if you've got an idea for a story or something, don't tell anyone. Get it all on the page. And then, because then you've got more motivation to actually get it out there. And then once you have it on the page, share it with people, get a friend to read it or something like that. So for me, that's, that might be part of it. I don't really sit down and talk about, hey, this is what my universe is like and this is how it all works. I have to get it on the page for it to be out there, I guess. The other thing I'll say is that, having a universe in your head or whatever, I'll go back and I'll flip through this and I'll think, oh yeah, I had forgotten that this character did this particular thing there. So it kind of takes on a life of its own, and it's sort of fun to go back to.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your publisher spent most of its time in film, and you played around with the idea, what are the odds of Tom Cruise doing a movie? Realistically, what are the odds of maybe this company taking it and doing a film sort of adaptation, I guess, of your story?
Yeah, it was kind of in the back of my mind when I sort of looked at this company and who they were, and now they were looking to to publish some fiction as well. Part of it was, I wonder if they're looking to sort of just get some intellectual property that they can do exactly that with. So in the contract, I mean, if they were to market this as a film or as a movie, or if they were to turn it into a franchise, that was the thing. Getting the contract and looking through the contract, it was as though they were imagining this could be the next Star Wars. It won't, but I mean, it had stuff about how we would split profits on, I don't think it said specifically action figures, but merchandising and all sorts of stuff like that. So I think that's always something in these companies' minds. I assume that was in this publisher's mind. I don't know. Realistically, I guess if it continues to sell well and it gets very popular, right? They own the rights to it, so they can. And that's what they do. They do movies. So it would be pretty neat. I would be pretty surprised if it got turned into a film or a television show, but I guess it's not outside of the realm of possibility.
Yeah. Have you thought about, if that happens, the screenwriter saying, we're just going to change the end?
Yeah.
And is that scary or not?
No. I mean, honestly, for me, one of the things I had to learn early on is, you write the stuff, you create it, and then you send it out there to do work, right? And I try not to, once they're out there, I try not to be married to them. So if a producer wanted to take it, and I guess, if they were going to do terribly awful things with it, and I think I even stipulated that in my contract, that I could take my name off of it. So if it turned into a movie that was just something I would not want to be associated with in any way, I had the right to remove my name from any sort of credit and still get the money that I was due for. Yeah, I don't know. I guess if in 15 years this actually happens, we could have this conversation again, and I might be saying, can you believe what they did with it? There you go.
So how many downloads have actually been purchased on Amazon?
I don't know. I think they send me quarterly. They send me quarterly statements. So in the contract, the first iteration of the contract, they just wanted me to write it and we'd split all the profits. And I said, I can't invest that time to do that. So I was paid up front, and now I get a smaller share of the profits. I'm not sure if they've earned back the money they paid me up front. I don't know. I don't know a count. And I know it hasn't jumped up any Amazon bestseller list like they want. Although they do tell me that it's selling steadily, which is neat. And they also tell me that it's surprisingly big in the UK. And no one can quite figure out why. But I guess it's selling really well in the UK. So I don't know. I don't. No. Yeah.
Taking away from the first bleed, do you have any plans, or is anything in the works for another book in the near future? Or?
Yeah, so the book that I'm working on right now is a manuscript for University of Pittsburgh Press based on my dissertation. So that's the that's the book that's in the works right now. That's right. Yeah, I know, right? That's the one that's going to have a print run of 17 maybe for academic libraries somewhere. No, there's some things that might turn into novels if I just sort of need extrinsic motivation for that, right? Short stories are nice, They're easy to write. Oh, they're not easy to write. They're very hard to write. But they're easy to sort of, as far as time goes, and they sell a lot easier. So I don't have a sequel to this in the works right now. No. Yeah.
So who would you pick to play Becca at camp?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see. Would you want to star in a movie? No? Okay. Who's that actress? She was in the Underworld. Kate Beckinsale. Yeah. Yeah, she would definitely be. Maybe Cam? Yeah. And then we'd need like a younger sort of, because Cam already comes off as like the what's a nice way to say a bad A? She's a hardened person, yeah. Okay. A really hardened character who knows what she needs to do, whereas Becca, she really has to grow into that leadership role. So we need sort of, I don't know, like a Zooey Deschanel or someone? I'm not really sure. I don't know. Yeah. Who? A Daisy Ridley. Okay. Who's Daisy Ridley? Oh, all right. Yeah. Ray. Okay, we'll do that. Cool. Yeah.
Do you read reviews?
Of my own book? Yeah. If we were getting a lot of them. So that's the thing I'll say. Apparently, they really want Amazon reviews. I guess the way that online books work, you got to get a lot of Amazon reviews. So if you read it and you like it, leave an Amazon review. It's been reviewed by at least one magazine who gave it good reviews. Yeah, I mean, if it was reviewed a lot, I'd probably be reading the reviews. Maybe with a grain of salt.
Have you had any other of your short stories reviewed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a few websites that regularly will review sort of issues of magazines and talk about the individual short stories. And one of my stories was a Locust starred review once. Another one of my short stories was reviewed, and a reviewer said it wasn't very good. You know, it didn't do anything. It was strange. So yeah, I mean, you get both sides of that. I'm not. You know what I'm terrified of? I'm terrified of the review. I'm already frightened of the reviews of my scholarly book when that comes out. Like, those are the reviews that I'm scared of. You know, those are the reviews in the journals where the people are like pouring through it and looking to find, you know, all the errors in my arguments. So, fiction, no, that's just for fun. Yep.
This might be a dumb question given you have a lot of short stories in the novel. But do you have any of them where you're just like in love with or content with or just like very yes about the world and the characters that you created? That you're just, this is it.
Yeah, I have a few that I'm pretty happy with. Generally, if a story gets purchased and published, I feel pretty happy with it, because that means an editor liked it enough to, you know, put it in their magazine. I feel like it did its job, right? But of those, yeah, maybe there's 4 or 5 that I could point to and say I'd like to go in that direction. I really like what I do there. Yeah.
On the other side of that, is there anything that you've like put out there and gotten published and just been like, oh, that was a bad idea? Like anything you kind of wish you could go back and redo, or like look through again? You know, if you weren't asked.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. No. All right. Well, thank you guys for coming out. I'll be up here for a while. I'm happy to chat some more, but thank you, and thanks to the library. And